and I'll open up ACC in a minute because I kind of just want to go over the stuff before I get to it. Anyway.
That's the brake pad
Yes.
notes that were put into driver resources some time ago.
Yes, because I just want to explain to you what the brakes are. That way, and I'm going to kind of just go over a rule of thumb that I'll use as well. All right, when it comes to the brakes, you're defaulted on the if you use the safe or the aggressive, you're defaulted to the number 2 brakes, which are the endurance brakes. They're the ones for the 12-hour races, 24-hour races. They last longer, and they're really good. As a rule of thumb, for what we do in the league, in most races, an hour or so, the 1 brakes are the brakes you use, no matter what. The only time you would not use the 1 brakes would be in wet weather, because you would need softer brakes for wet weather, which would be the 3 brakes.
Okay. Do you know if the wet presets come with pad 3 already?
Yes, they do.
Okay, cool.
As far as why they are different, I think what the difference is actually in the brake pad itself is the thickness of it's either the material or the thickness of the brake pad itself. I'm not sure what the exact technical difference is. It's probably the material in the rotor and the brake pad. That'd be my assumption. There's probably one of them might be more coarse, might be able to grip up more. I don't know the technical part of it. But from my experience, for a race at least that's a 1 hour, I always use the 1 brakes. Now, the thing where the debates get started at are right here on those 4 brakes. Because they don't last long and they don't feel as good as the ones. They don't last as long as the ones. To me, I feel it's harder to trail brake with the 4 brakes for me. Because I feel like as soon as I'm touching it, they're gripping.
Yeah.
And I would also recommend, when you guys get a chance, is just run a few laps with each brake set to actually feel the difference yourself, and you would notice it right away. You will notice the brakes right away, especially going from the 2s to the 1s or the 1s to the 4s, because that's what people. I didn't know this till about a few months back on the brakes, because I just never messed with the brakes. I thought I didn't know what the brakes did. But now that I've learned it, I always race with the 1 brakes, no matter what.
All right.
Now, if I was in an endurance race, I would swap to the 2s. But that's just if you need to do that. Now,
have you ever come across a sim that had different choices of brake pads?
No, ACC is the first one I've ever had that.
All right.
R Factor 2 might do it. I just haven't looked in the setup in a while. I don't know if they model brake wear or not on there. As far as I know, ACC the first one to actually have brake wear in it. So the fact that it actually has brake wear means that it will fade over time. That's why if you want in a longer race, you would want to use the 2s or something else like that, because you'd have to keep swapping the brakes during the race. As far as, like I said, general rule of thumb, you can try the 4s for qualifying. I tinker with it. I just feel more comfortable just sticking with the 1s for what I'm using during the race, because I'm not a hot lapper. I can't hot lap. I'm not good at hot lapping. So
you can actually see your braking points vary between the different braking pads.
Yes.
Cool.
You'll notice it, because with the 1s you can brake deeper than the 2s, and then deeper than the 3s. But with the fours are weird. You really can't brake any deeper than the ones, but you brake quicker. I don't understand it. I just feel like you're able to. I don't understand it. I don't understand the four brakes as well. But they're not a. I don't know what they are. That's all I know about those. I don't know enough about them. So, like I said, that's the first adjustment I will make on a car. And it's just a standard adjustment I make to the car without even driving it on the track because I know the brakes. And that's something that you will learn as you spend more time doing the setups. Is if you're familiar with the car, you will kind of know what you like in the car to begin with before you start. So that's what I do. First thing I do as soon as I jump into the car is I check the pads and make sure it's on pad number 1 on front and rear.
Okay.
Which to coincide with that right there, which will go into the aero section a little bit later. On the ones, you need to have a little bit more open of a brake duct than you would on the 3s or the 2s, just to make sure you keep the pads at the right the brakes at the right temperature. So I mean, like at Spa, you still use a real small brake duct because the Camel Straight will cool them off way too much. I mean, because the Camel Straight cools your brakes off a lot. Like tracks with long straights is where you would notice the brakes actually cooling off and getting cold again. Have you guys ever watched it, like either down the back straight of Paul Ricard or the Camel Straight on Spa, how your brakes start out at green and go all the way nearly back to blue?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, a light blue is fine, but you want to try to keep it as close to the optimum temperature as possible. That's what the brake ducts are for. It's just to maintain the temperature of the brakes. So I always try to run as small as I possibly can. And then the next thing is we know what the optimum tire pressures are for ACC, which is 27.5. So the first thing I do is I run 5 laps, get tires plenty of time run, and I look at my tire pressures at the end of my stint, and I adjust accordingly to get it to where it needs to be at. Then I run another 5-lap stint, and then get your tires in the right ballpark. I mean, it's not an exact science because you can't get it perfectly to stay perfect across the whole track because on straights they will drop in pressure.
Can I ask you how you're getting your tire pressures? Are you checking while you're driving, or are you returning to the pits? And if you're returning to the pits, are you returning via the command thing, or are you entering the pits and checking there?
Here, I will show you right here. Actually, let me load up ACC. What I do is I do it 2 ways. I look at it, and then I double check when I go back in there. What I mean by that is, like, let's say I'm sitting in the garage. You can see it on the tire section, the last recorded temperatures and pressures and everything. But we'll get the details of it here in a minute. But let me look this. Here, I'm gonna go to single player practice. Nürburgring. 38C. Woo, that's a hot track.
I love how quick you're on the track in this game.
Oh, it's amazing. All right, here I'm gonna go to the default aggressive. So like in here, the first thing I do is I always go to fuel and strategy and adjust the brakes to the ones. It's just a standard thing I do. I always do it. Again, the 1 brakes are my preferred brakes and most people's preferred brakes in ACC. They're the better brakes for anything less than about an hour or less. If I was racing more than an hour, maybe 2 hours or more, I would use the 2 brakes. Because the brakes do wear over time. And whenever I said I'd get on the track and look at this right here, I would look on the track, but I also would look right here where it says PSI hot. Mm-hmm. That's the last pressure recorded before you return.
Yeah, I realized that it gets unreasonably hot and through when I return to the pits after I spun the car. I can't use the data then. I realized that.
If you spin, you cannot use the data.
Yeah.
If you spin or lock up, even stopping, you cannot use that data because it skews it slightly. Now, if you look at it while you're on the track, let's say I'm over here on the track, and I'm looking at it right here, at the bottom right there, then I would actually go. I look at both. I actually look at both the actual tire data and I also look at like the tire data like on the MFD and in the setup screen to kind of, because it's not an exact science. What I mean by an exact science is depending on the part of the track, it reaches certain dip pressures.
Yeah. If you've got like if you're coming out on the Corvone in Misano, you've got I see it. This.
Okay, and once I get the pressures where I want them, then I start adjusting the mechanical grip of stuff, which is in this mechanical grip section. And as I'm doing that, okay, I'm gonna pull this up on my other monitor for a second. And
I think we just lost Jake.
Yeah, but he said he had to go, so I knew that was gonna happen.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. That's why I'm recording it for everybody. All right, and then now that we're in the mechanical section, which is this section right here. All right. Whenever you look at this screen, what do you notice about this screen right here?
I noticed that I'm used to looking at the Porsche, which has much different wheel rates on the front than the Aston obviously does.
Yes.
The red line is much lower than I'm used to.
The red line is much lower? What red line?
From the red line of the front tires.
Oh, that red line?
Yeah. Well, that's probably not what you asked for.
Oh. I'm not sure which one. I'm not sure what these lines are. I think that's the track, and that's the lowest it'll go. The yellow line is.
Mm.
If I'm not mistaken, that's the how far the thing compresses. Because if I adjust the wheel rate, the yellow line drops down, which makes me thinks of what it. That makes me think what it is. But if I adjust the bump stop range, the red line runs.
Oh, that's it. All right.
Yeah, that's the bump stops. Is what those are. I had to figure out what they were. I was like, the bump stops.
That makes sense.
The bump stops are kind of a fine-tuning thing. I don't mess with those very often. I just kind of go with what they are and just get the car to handle the way I want it to. On a higher downforce track, you would want a stiffer suspension. GT3 cars are aero dependent. However, they're not that aero dependent. They're really not. They love mechanical grip, in my experience. So let's say I went on the track. Let's say I go on the track and I go in here into turn one. Let's see. There we go. Let's say I'm driving around the track and I notice on turn one right up here that when I turn in, it gets a little oversteer. Let's say I had that. I would run laps with what I have just to see what the car handles like. And let's say for the first thing that I adjust is for, let's say it's about oversteer first on the mechanical grip side of things. What I would do, I'll say I had some oversteer. The first thing I would adjust would either be the springs or the ARBs. It depends on how severe it is. Depends on how much of a change you want to make. Usually you change things in increments of 1 or 2 just to keep from going too far with something. So let's say I had some oversteer and wanted to dial it out. There's 3 options you could do. The first 4 options, but 2 of them are the same thing, just a reverse way of doing them. All right. Let's say I stiffen the front anti-roll bar, stiffen the front, and that will not let the car roll as much. The anti-roll bar is a bar that kind of, when the car is in a corner, it keeps the car from pitch angle. So the car is stiffer. It makes the car stiffer. Like in the actual suspension of the car, it just keeps it from wanting to pitch with the pitch in the corner. So if you stiffen the front, it makes the car harder to turn, which adds understeer to it. And it depends on how much of an oversteer that you have on how much to put into it. And this is the weird thing about it. There's other ways to do the same thing. Let's say that I have oversteer. I could take a couple clicks out of the rear anti-roll bar. It does the same thing. To a degree, anyway. It depends on...
I usually do it through ride height, or I used to in all the other racing games.
Yeah. But the reason you focus on the mechanical grip first is because having the suspension right is more important than the aero. Because you can always still adjust the aero for the other. Because even though you can still adjust the aero, you don't have to worry about the consequences of the aero. You do it 2 different times because the reason you want to is if you have the suspension right, the aero is the icing on the cake to get the last bit of speed.
Understandable.
Now, I've seen people mess with the steer ratio right here. I don't mess with it.
I do that. I love very short steering ratios.
I just like the stock Aston one. I just like it. It works great for me. I mean, that's a personal preference. Another thing is there's certain things that are just personal preferences to the driver, like the brake bias. It doesn't matter what your brake bias is. Some people like more towards the front, some like more towards the rear. It's on your driving style and the car you're in. I can't tell you a rule of thumb. I will say this, though. Brake bias, I notice more of an issue with in the trail braking issue, whereas if you lock up and you spin out under braking while trying to trail brake, a lot of times you have too much rear bias. You need to move it to the front a little bit, and it will help them from locking up the front. Or locking up the rears. But if you're locking up and spinning in the braking zones, move your brake bias up a little bit, and that should solve that issue under braking anyway. But with ABS and everything in ACC, you really don't have to worry about it. But you can change it to suit your taste. Now, going back to the whole thing, what I said about the anti-roll bar on the rear, you do the same thing as a similar effect to the front. You see where I'm going with this, right? Where they're asymmetrical. So if I raise the front springs, oversteer. If I drop the rear springs, or understeer, and it gives you understeer. It's asymmetrical. And it depends on what part of the corner you're having the issue with. If it's on the entry of the corner and the weight transfer, it depends on where the weight transfer is. Like on entry, I usually mess with the front first. And if it's on the exit, I focus more on the rear because all the weight's transferring to the rear. So it depends on if it's entry or exit on which one to mess with. And as a general rule of thumb, you always want to keep them symmetrical on the front and the back. Like, so let's say I change it 1 click here. I had to change it 1 click on the other side, on the left side as well, because on road courses, you need it like it right there. Now, there's certain tracks, let's say like a Lime Rock Park. Are you familiar with that track?
Yeah, I am.
How it's mostly is it mostly a right-hand corner? Like all of them, but like one corner is a right-hand corner.
Yeah, it is.
You would set the car up a little differently for that, but tracks with about equal amount of left and rights, you set them up evenly, just so that way, because you got to compromise with a setup, because you can have every corner but one corner perfect. Because you have to make slight compromises for every single corner, because you can't get every single corner correct, because every corner is different. Now you can get it close, but you can't get it perfect, because let's say a perfect example of this would be Suzuka. We're talking about all the different types of corners. You got the S's. You got 130R. You have spoon. You got the double right-hander underneath the bridge.
You got a hairpin.
And then you get the hairpin. I mean, you got so many different types of corners, and they're all going different ways. They're all going different ways. So you need to keep a symmetrical to comp, because there's so much going on. You can be good through the majority. You can be good, but you can't get it perfect through everything. And the goal of a setup is to get it to where you can drive confidently, because if you have more confidence in the car, that's where the real speed comes in, because you're able to push it more. That's what setups really do, is give you a car that can handle and gives you the confidence to be able to handle, to be able to push it more. Because if you have something you set up and trust, and you're setting up and you're getting it to work the way you want it to work, you're able to push it harder and harder. And that's the reason why setups make a difference, but not as much as you think. Especially with good default baseline setups that are on ACC to begin with, because these ACC setups are great. A lot of what I do is just minor tweaking just to get it comfortable, and I'm fast enough with it. Like I'm not that upset with what happens. Do you have any questions about the mechanical grip side of things?
No, that was pretty concise. I like it.
All right.
So, I like the difference between. I understood the difference between what I'm going for at turn in or exit of the corner. I understood the importance of the anti-roll bar, which I neglected before. Now I think I'm good. Thank you.
I should have went on this right here when I first started. A setup cannot fix bad driving either.
You're right.
And this is the key. This is the key of doing a setup. You would have to drive very consistently to be able to actually be able to notice the differences in the setup. If you're very inconsistent, you working on trying to build a setup, you probably build in the wrong direction. If you're able to run very consistent most of the time, you'll be able to set it up and be able to understand what you're doing more. And you have to know the driving line. You have to know the driving line. You have to know the driving line. Because if you're over driving into corners, you're just going to understeer. And you can't really dial out overdriving. You can't dial that out. You just can't. So you have to know the driving line for any of this to do anything. For any of these changes to do anything, you have to know the track and know the driving line. Now we go. Well, I'll talk over here about the dampers right here. They're pretty self-explanatory. They do a weird thing where they. It's for the springs. It's dampers on the springs. It helps slow them and speeds them up. All I know that they do is softer ones, like a quick rebound makes it bounce back and go back to normal, quit faster. There's the bumps, the slow on the down part of the spring. And I don't mess with these because it's just there's a lot of stuff about this. And I just don't mess with them because they make a difference, but they're really minor differences. And that would involve telemetry to be able to understand these. And I don't use telemetry because that's just more of a headache than just driving the car and feeling it out for me. All right, now to talk about the aero. Now let's say that we've already got a car that handles good. And I'm actually going to show you Arrow real quick. Let's see, because this actually worked really well with Arrow. So I'm going to turn the rear wing all the way off real quick. And because on a lot of the faster corners, have you ever tested what the rear wing does before?
Yeah, I did in this game because I'm not really used to cars that rely on Arrow.
Yeah. Okay. From my experience, if you don't have enough rear downforce, you go into a fast corner. You know what happens?
You turn in, got no grip in the rear, and probably spin out to the outside.
See, having no rear, the zero on the rear wing is not going to matter on this part of the track because it's not a fast section.
I'll wait for the next corner.
Yeah, now this next corner, I actually might be able to get away with it. No. You kind of see what I'm talking about. But the corner I'm really wanting to try is the Schumacher S.
Oh yeah.
With no rear wing, because that's a high downforce corner. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. That's a high downforce corner. And I'm probably going to lose it. See, it's not wanting to turn. Like, have you ever played I'm sure you played the F1 video game, right?
Actually I didn't.
Well, have you ever drove an F1 car before?
Yeah. You can take these flat, I know.
Well, the point I was going to make is, have you ever tried to take a corner with the DRS open?
Oh yeah, okay, alright.
That's what like having the lowest rear wing setting would feel like. Would be your car would just instant spin because it doesn't have any downforce. So the goal of downforce, the goal of the Arrow is the most amount of downforce that you need with the least amount of drag. That is the goal. So the goal is to have the most amount of downforce with the least amount of drag. So what you would need to do would be start out with the least amount of downforce and kind of work your way up to where you need it. That's what I don't do it naturally that way. I run the default and kind of go down each increment until it gets too far. Then I go the other, and then I go back to what the last one I was okay, because the less drag, the faster you can go. And that's.
I've started I usually start with the aggressive preset and add some usually on the front bar. That's maybe just.
See, I don't have a splitter, so I mean, it has a splitter too, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, it does.
And the brake ducts, I always try to make those as small as possible, just because I want them as small as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it comes to the ride height, you want a rake. You want it as low as possible, but with a small rake. And it does make a difference. And to the extent, depends on how far you want to go with it.
Mm-hmm.
You want to have it low as possible, but with the rear spoiler, you want to keep it up high as you can, where it's going to squat itself back down with the air going down the track. Basically, the car is going to be looking like you know how the Red Bulls look so jacked up, and then on the track they're flat.
Yeah, I'm used to classic car racing, or actually classic car racing, where they'll figure out that. Have you seen classic cars racing recently? They usually drop the rear very, very low to not have a high center of mass, but have a much lower center of mass than they used to 30 or 40 years ago, because the tires are so much better that they don't slide around anymore, and they can utilize that grip with having the rear super low, so it doesn't move around that much, and it's not as unnerving to drive anymore.
Huh.
Usually go with that.
So instead of having a rake, you had a backwards rake.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's
See
interesting.
What was a good example? I think every E30 BMW that's driven now on classic tracks is you can hardly see the top part of the tires anymore. Well, they used to be pretty even front to back.
That's interesting. No, that actually is interesting right there. But like I said, you want to. Like I said though, like that is minor because you set it. Because once you have the handling where you want it, you can only improve it from the arrow or make it worse. If you make it worse, go back to what it was before. It's one of those things where you can gain performance with it, but the default on here, especially on here, the default is so good, you don't have to make huge changes on it.
What I'm struggling with is curbs, because I usually drive cars that don't handle curbs that much, and I've got the habit to overshoot my lines a little bit. And for example, on the entry of Schumacher, as my car bottoms out on the curb on the entry, which makes for a fun ride through the rest of the corner if I hit it wrong. So, and
I mean, if you want to raise, if you have curbs that low, you might have to raise your ride height up and sacrifice a little bit of aero for that. Because if it's something that's if it's beneficial to hit the curb, because you can soften the front springs to compensate for the raise in the ride height. Because with the arrow pushing down, it can push it back down where it needs to be at. Do you get what I'm saying? But you can actually set the bump stops to the part where you can actually have it stop just a hair above where it needs to be at, because if you get it close, it's not an exact science. You mean you could be sitting there for 20, 30 hours trying to get the setup perfect.
Yeah.
And honestly, you can keep on tweaking it to your heart's content. I mean, it's never ending cycle. Because there's so many variables with it, because you have which is a big variable.
Indeed.
Yeah, like the drivers, what I refer to, the driver is a big variable in this. Consistency. And that's what I'm going to talk about. But outside of aero, now these are things that I adjust during the race.
Yeah, I do too.
My traction control, which for me, I have to use it. I have to use it a little bit more than what it wants me to, but I have to use it. But that's me. And you have to, and I'll increase my ABS as the race goes on. This is something I do just to make it better for me.
Yeah, to even out some of these minor inconsistencies that amplify when you've got your worn tires.
Yep. I made the mistake of not doing it this past weekend. Now, some cars have these 2 traction controls. Does your car have 2 traction controls or just one? In the Porsche?
It has 2, but I realized that the second is the cutoff, just like how much it turns down the
engine. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you knew that anyway. I was wanting to make sure you knew what that one did, because I didn't know what it did for the longest. I didn't know what it did, so I didn't know. I just wanted to make sure that we knew what that was. Now, when it comes to the ECU map, that's your engine map. I always run my max engine unless I'm trying to save fuel. Most races under 12 hours, I would run full engine map just because there's no point. You know what I mean? Because you don't lose that much fuel comparatively. Now over a 12 to 24 hour race, I would understand it. But anything 3 hours or under, 6 hours maybe, but 6 hours or under, what benefit is there to running a lower one? Because it doesn't save you a full pit stop at that point. Because that's just something that you would have to run for a whole race. And you have to make the justification if the time difference would be enough to be able to make it up by missing that one pit stop. And that's a little harder to justify. But I know the Porsche's number 1 is the 8, right?
It is, and I was feeling clever at my first online race I ever did and jacked it up to 10, which is a pace car setting. I was wondering why I've overtaken the straight so easily. So I'm not getting that wrong anymore, I hope.
Yeah, I believe 8's the qualifying one. Is 8 qualifying? I don't know the. Yeah,
I think it has qualifying with most aggressive qualifying setting.
And then after all that's done and the car's handling very good, is when I would adjust my cambers and my cambers. And basically what you would do with the cambers, or you see this right here where the wear is inner, middle, outer.
Yeah.
You see how it's like that?
Mm.
All the camber is the tilt of the tires, like how the tires sit on the track. You know how if you look on an F1 car, the tires, like the outer edges of the tires are pointed up off the ground. Like, have you ever seen an F1 car just stop and you see the camber of the tires, and the tires have the edge of the tire has a little gap from the track, and only running. That's the camber, and because whenever you hit the corner and under a downforce, it flattens itself out. But on a stop position, that's just the angle of it, and you kind of want to set your camber to where these are as even as possible. There's different splits that people shoot for, and that's on you. It does change the handling of the car slightly because, and you will go faster because the bigger the contact patch, the more grip you have. Do you understand that concept?
I do.
So the bigger tire patch, the more tire grip in the track, which means you can carry more speed in that corner. Is what that means. And you want to try to keep that as small of a split as possible because, granted, these tires last a long time, and these tires don't really wear that quickly, which is good. But get these tires hot? No. Once these tires get hot, like you heat them up, that's a whole different story. Like if you flat spot them or anything like that right there, you will regret it the rest of the race. So what I would say is just try to make sure you keep everything pretty fairly even. I don't know if that 3 degrees in Celsius is a big difference or not.
I think 3 degrees in Celsius. No, no,
it's not a big difference between 76 and 73. It's not a big difference.
Nah, it's fine. I'm on the rear car. I think we're going for 85 in the on the middle third from the inside.
Well, yeah, I just ran that short a little bit, so the temperatures you can get up to what they needed to be at, but that's just the last red temperature. The reason
I think it's I was thinking it's like 85 to 88 and to 80 or something.
The reason I ask is because I'm not familiar with the Celsius scale, so I don't know if 3 degrees is a huge difference in Celsius or not. I don't know. I don't know.
It's appropriate, yeah.
Because Fahrenheit, if it was in Fahrenheit, I'd go for maybe a 10, maybe 12 degree split at most. Because I want as much contact as possible. And these two work together, the wear and the temperatures.
Mm-hmm.
This is also how you would know if you don't know the optimum pressures for the car. This is how you can tell if you have your tire overinflated or underinflated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if it was overinflated, the middle would wear more, would wear more and be hotter than the edges of it.
Yeah.
And the inverse would be the same if it was underinflated. The edges would be more than the middle if it was underinflated. That's how you would go. That's how I know that. Now, caster, I think it tilts the wheel forward and back. That physically moves them slightly. I don't know to the extent. For me, it changes the force. Basically, as far as I'm concerned, that gets the force feedback set the way you would like it, and it kind of doesn't do anything other than that. It's like the feel of the car.
That's what I'm struggling with. I need much more force feedback because I'm used to checking the box on standard center quarter that says amplified understeer feel, and I don't have that, and this is the thing I struggle the most with. So what you mean, more degrees caster is more strength of the steering wheel, right?
Yes, it makes it stiffer. Like, for me, with my wheel setup and stuff, like the default settings are great, but like in all seriousness, it will change the way your wheel feels. Like as far as actual technical driving on the track, I can't notice a difference, but I can feel it in my wheel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm doing. This is what I use the steering ratio for, to not only have more direct steering, but to have more strength in the steering and to easier feel when I'm slipping with the front.
Speaking of that, I'm going to plug a video that Gamer Muscle did a couple weeks ago about the rotation. He actually talked about doing that with the car, with the steer ratio and the caster.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to which way it goes, I don't know. I've done that for years in iRacing. It really, I don't know if it's broke. If it's just broken in iRacing, it's the way it worked in iRacing. It doesn't really do anything different here. It just changes the way it, like, I don't know which way it goes. So I'm gonna go extreme with it real quick. I'm gonna max it out. So real quick, see what it does differently. I mean, I don't know how big of a difference it makes. I mean, oh, okay. The weight of the wheel is a lot heavier.
I still on.
That's heavier. That's heavier.
I still need zero wing.
Oh, whoops.
No, I'm not saying you are. I'm just questioning if you are.
That's actually a good question. I probably am. But like I'm feeling. I'm just worried about feeling the wheel. Like the weight of the wheel feels different. Like it just feels like. What's the word I'm looking for? It's just a heavier feel. And there's some oversteer from not having the wing. And I gotta compensate for without the wing. Here's the thing though. Even without the wing, I can run this track. I might have to run it slower, but I can still drive it around it.
Yeah.
Oh. All right. As I'm turning, and there's my wing again. Now this ought to be fun. Oh yeah. But the steering feels a lot heavier now that I've done that.
All right, I'm gonna try that.
It's not. I don't know how far to go with it. A lot of people have a setting that they prefer for the feel of it, and just kind of just keep it as a default. Now it could change with updates as updates come out, but that's what I do with it. Let me look at this right here and see the actual technical thing that it actually does.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Here we go. More caster gives more negative camber to the. Oh, that's actually what it technically does. But
basically, what you feel on a bike when you've got a very stark difference in the angle between the point where you've got the handlebars, the turning point of the handlebars and the wheel axle, right? That's what it is.
Interesting. It would actually do that. Interesting.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So you will actually have to adjust your. Okay. Find a caster setting that you like, and then do your cambers after that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and he's gone.
And then the last thing I was going to tell you about is the toe on this section. Okay. You know what toe is? Where the wheels are pointed outwards or inwards.
Looking at top of the car.
Yeah, at the very front of the car, of course, tilted outwards or inwards. Mm-hmm. I believe toe out is more stability in the rear, like you're able to. And if I'm not mistaken, if it's inward, it's less stable.
It is, because the wheel that will have the way is it's either turned a little bit more in or a little bit more out, right? Yeah, that's understandable. Because you transfer the wheel to the, let's say, the right side, the weight to the right side, and the right side is a little bit more turned into the corner, it'll turn it a little bit better. And if it's a little pointed outward, it'll turn out a little bit worse.
Yeah, okay, toe out is stability in a straight line. No, wait, toe in is.
Toe in is stability in a straight line. Oh, I can see that. Okay, yeah, because
okay, I got it backwards. Okay, so toe in. Okay, that's right. Toe out is where it makes it more unstable. Okay, yeah, I get that backwards. Like,
okay.
But the toe in, basically toe in will induce understeer in the corner as both wheels are pushing inwards and fighting against each other. Which toe out will reduce straight line stability to where the car is slightly wandering to the left or the right when you're trying to drive in a straight line. The front toe out offers more grip while turning, as the tires are not fighting against each other. So imagine both front wheels are pointed away from each other slightly, which is the toe out. Now imagine whenever you are in a corner, the outside front of the tire, or rather, that is following at a slightly longer radius. The inside tire has a tighter radius to navigate, so it actually needs to be turning slightly more. Toe out gives us this. So like with toe out, it actually keeps the tires kind of. How familiar with like a 4-wheel drive are you? Or like posi traction rear ends? You know what a posi traction rear end is?
What was the last word?
Well, like posi track.
Yeah, right, okay, yeah.
Okay, you know how like on a posi track, where you know how most rear ends on a car, like one wheel is only turning. Do you get where I'm going with this? Where on a posi track, if you're going around a corner, if the other one will start to move as well whenever it needs to, you know what I mean? Think of toe out is just a way the tires just being turned away from each other, doing a similar effect of giving it what it needs to be able to turn. What I mean by that is if they're pointed outwards, which is toe out, the one on the outside will take a longer radius while the other one's taking a tighter one, and being able to keep the car going through the corner faster. But too much toe out can equal to problems. So you don't use a whole lot of it. Now, if we want to go about other things, but an ACC, there's not a whole lot you can adjust on the car, which is good and bad at the same time. But GT3s have really tight regulations, so there's not really a whole lot you can do to these cars anyway. I mean,
it's basically a racing series for wealthy people and pros alike. So it has to be easy to set up and maintain.
Exactly. So
BOP,
especially the BOP. I mean, but also fuel. Make sure you run fuel runs and know how much fuel you need for the race. For qualifying, my rule of thumb is 3 laps plus one warm-up lap, so 4 laps of fuel.
I usually screw up 1 or 2, so I'm on 5 or something like that.
Well, the reason I do that is because I want to try to keep it. I try to just run a 3-lap stint and just go with it. Because I have race pace. I don't have qualifying pace. I'm not great at qualifying. I'm just not.
Yeah, I like the feeling of being able to try again if I screw up. So a lap or 2 gives me more confidence and makes me better in the long run. Now,
what I'm talking to you about is setting up a car for a race. Now, when it comes to setting it up for qualifying, you would make the car slightly more aggressive with a lot less fuel. Like, that's the only difference between setting it up for a race and qualifying. You would actually try to make the car more aggressive in the sense of less stable, but able to put a faster lap out. So I would actually make the car freer or more oversteery for qualifying than I would for a race.
Mhm.
But that's a fine line. You don't want to make it too big of a difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, let me see something real quick. Let me move that up.
I can see how the car turns upward in the background. I love that.
Oh wait, does it really?
Yeah.
Oh, I've never noticed it. Hey.
Yeah, it's great.
And one thing I will always recommend doing is, if you're unsure what something does, just max it all the way out and see what it does.
Yeah, I do. You know what? Isn't that unrealistic? Because I think the car's on its jack stands right now, and it should be on the ground.
I mean, it's a simulator. I mean, that's our logic.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the logic of it. I was just playing with that. I mean, now the dampers. Okay, this is where it gets weird. They counteract the spring's natural compressing. So they kind of do this. Well, can I say? Those are very, very, very complicated and do need kind of a telemetry thing. That's why I don't mess with them. It involves telemetry. And if it involves telemetry, I don't mess with it because I care about what the car feels like. I don't care about the technical parts of the car. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For me, I get the car that feels the way I want it to feel, which is how I'm about guitar. Technically, I might play something wrong, but it sounds good. Sounds good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you have to drive it for 3 hours. If it's faster, but you can't feel it, what's the use?
Yeah. I mean, because if I can't drive it, I can't drive it. Like you can set it up perfectly to be a telemetry and everything, and I can't drive it. There's no point in it. So, like I said, I would always recommend doing stints of at least 5 laps for adjustments before you change anything.
Probably better than my 3 laps stints.
Well, the reason is give your tires 3 laps to warm up, which usually takes 2 to 3 laps for your tires to get to the stability point of their temperatures and pressures. And then 3 laps of actually driving it like it right there. And you take mental notes, 2 or 3 laps to kind of just feel out with the tires at the right temperature. Really 3 laps. It's because your 3rd lap's going to be your one of your better laps. So, but you would notice it right away, and you slightly get faster and faster. You should be. Now, adjust your pressures accordingly to what you need to for it.
Mm-hmm.
Until you get up to the point. Now, where I'm not going to be able to help you is whenever the track temperature drops, however so much, I don't know how much of a difference that makes. So you kind of got to start with what you know and kind of make a guess.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately, what I would do in the race would be, if you know the track's going to be cooling off, you increase your pressures. How much to increase, I don't know.
Yeah. I'll have to try that out too.
But good news is, it automatically defaults in the pit window your current tire settings.
Mm-hmm. Would you thanks for waiting up.
Hey, no problem, right there. Now, as far as the setups goes, let's say you dialed in everything, and let's say during the race the weather's changed, you're already on the track, and let's say you need to make an adjustment like in the race. Like, let's say your car's very oversteery in the middle of the race. Let's just say the weather changed completely.
Mm-hmm.
Let me look here on the MFD. These are all the adjustments that you got for the race, which is your tire pressures. That's all you can change. So in the middle of a race, you really can't change much. Fortunately, there's a small mechanical grip pack that you have available to you. And that would be raising your fronts or your rears. You might not be at the optimum pressures, but you can actually get a more stable car that way.
Mm-hmm.
If you're having an issue with oversteer, raise your front. If you're having an issue with understeer, not understeer, but oversteer, or wait, understeer. Wait, which one did I say first?
I think you have to repeat again because I was typing because that sounds valuable information. Sounds like that. If you have oversteer, change the pressures and the fronts.
Yeah, raise them up. Because that makes the front and adds understeer to the car, and vice versa for the rears. If you have an issue with oversteer or understeer, raise the rear or lower the front. I'd always raise them up because I'd rather have a slight little. I'd rather have pressures be a little bit warmer than below.
Also, your pressures will probably be lower than the optimum, so raising up sounds like the smart thing to do.
Well, actually, and if you kind of don't know like how much you're off of it, you can increase the tire temperature to match the optimum. I'm just saying though, let's say you got the setup wrong slightly. That's the only hack you have in a race is to adjust the pressures. They might not be optimum, but you can adjust the pressures to compensate for it. And that's the only adjustment you have. You can't change the springs right in the middle of a race.
Do you have any recommendations when there's a good time to change for? Do you have a recommendation if the wet race indicator is a good indicator to actually swap on wets, or should I have swapped on wets by then?
Okay, this is my rule of thumb on wets. I look at the weather and I look at how hard it's raining, and if I'm running a decent time on slicks and I'm able to drive it, I will stay on them as long as possible. However, when it comes to wets, I want to try to get off of them as soon as possible the other way around as well. So, because they heat up super fast, like you have to get off of them as soon as they like the lap starts getting hot, get off. You're wasting time. Like it's just time being lost because you're going slower. Like I said, I would wait until you have to turn on your windshield wiper. If you're turning your windshield wiper and your tires are cooling off, swap tires. If they're heating up, swap tires.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Back. So if you notice your pressure, just keep dropping because of the rain. It's time to swap. Especially, let's say before it started raining, you don't get your tires at like 27, and now they're down to 23, not 23, but 25, 24. Get out of them.
Okay, that's the critical number, right? I've let them go down to like 22 or something in my first wet race, and it felt bad. So
yeah, you need to get out of them as soon as possible. Now, as far as setting up for the wet, that's where the mechanical grip will matter more. That's why getting the mechanical grip set up right is the way to go. The only difference between wet weather racing and dry would be this. It's all mechanical grip at that point. Aero doesn't matter in the wet. Aero does not matter in wet.
Yeah.
Because you're not going fast enough for it to matter. But you got to run a slightly different engine mode, and you will have to run full ABS and traction control. Because if you don't, you're spinning the car out. So that's what you would have to do. Now, do you have any other questions about that right there?
Not now. I knew that happened, but no, I think I'm good.
Like I said, there's not a whole lot of
I've got one about that. Is